Bitcoin is going to blast up, not grind up, but blast up. It's going to power up much faster because now you have a pro-Bitcoin president, a pro-Bitcoin Congress, pro-Bitcoin legislation. We'll have pro-Bitcoin banks. We're going to have pro-Bitcoin institutions. We're going to have pro-Bitcoin mining, etc. So I think that Bitcoin goes from that powering up at 20% to blasting up much faster than that. And I think that the digital assets industry goes from decaying 20% now to blasting up. I think if you look at the world today, there's $900 trillion or more of wealth in the world. A lot of that wealth is invested in real estate. A lot of that wealth is invested in equity. A lot of that wealth is invested in gold, in art. A lot of that wealth is in currencies. A lot of that wealth is in bonds, corporate bonds, governmental bonds, and then a lot of that wealth is in various other forms of derivatives. The compelling use case, the most important use case in the world, the most valuable thing in the world is just long-term capital. Long-term store of value. That's worth half of all that. $450 trillion worth of long-term capital, right? When people struggle with what's the use case of Bitcoin or what's the use case of anything, well, the irony is they're staring right at it. It's like to be rich and stay rich forever. It's what everybody wants. It's what every kid wants. Every 3-year-old wants this. There's no one that ever lived in the history of the world that didn't want more money, more power, right? They wanted wealth and prosperity. So that's worth $450 trillion. Capital. That is the compelling thing. Now, what is currency? Well, currency is the medium of exchange. It's what I swap in order to get my gasoline, or in order to buy a donut, in order to pay the rent. And it's the high frequency liquid money, liquid stable high frequency money. It allows 400 million companies to have a price list with 100 items on it. So you've got billions and billions and billions of prices in a certain currency, and we need to swap that back and forth at high frequency. Well, how valuable is that? In a world without digital capital, without perfected capital, then we have to monetize the real estate, monetize the bond, monetize the stock, monetize the art, monetize, everything under the sun. What does that mean? It means that you pay twice as much as it's worth. You pay 50 times earnings, but the company's only worth 10 times earnings, but you pay 50 times. Why? I know wealthy people, they own 16 estates on the Eastern Shore, and they live in 2 of them. Like, why do they buy them? They land banking. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Well, the guy makes a lot of money every year, and he doesn't want to put it in a savings account, so he goes and he just buys a cool piece of property. And he buys another one. Well, okay, it sounds good, but here's the problem. The guy buys up the beautiful pieces of property, and so you can't afford it.
Right.
And if the rich guy wasn't buying up all the beautiful houses, they would cost half as much. And you could live in a beautiful house. So here's what happens. Some rich dude has 27 houses that are empty. You don't have a beautiful house. You have a family. Your kids, your dog could use the beautiful house. The rich dude doesn't even want the house. He just wants a long-term capital preservation strategy. So when you come back and you look at this, currency's not worth that much. This is the big idea. Everybody's scrambling over digital currency, blah, blah. I want Bitcoin to be a currency. It's not worth much, right? If I said to the richest guy in the world, Jeff Bezos, or Elon Musk now, if I said, hey, I have this little token and you can use it to buy coffee, and you don't have to pay 2%, to Visa. You can pay 1 Satoshi. Mm-hmm. How much of it you want to buy? I'm like, I don't know. I guess I can buy 0.0001% of my wealth I would invest in that. Like, I don't need that. Like, it's not a problem for me. If I said, oh, I have digital capital, it's returning 4 times the S&P index and twice the Magnificent Seven. It's going to generate 60% return. By the way, it's growing 3 times as fast as your company. How much of that do you want to buy?
All of it.
All of it. All of it. Okay, so the richest guy in the world wants to buy $100 billion of Bitcoin. The richest guy in the world wants to buy, I'll buy like $10,000, $5,000 of your digital token just to mollify you, right? To patronize you. So the point is, digital currency is not really worth that much. I mean, as an investment. It's not that it's a bad business, right? The world will run better. If the $1 trillion, and it sounds like a lot of money, $1 trillion, if 1 trillion, $10 trillion goes from analog money in the banking system to digital money, and you move it like Tether at the speed of light, oh, the world will work better. It'll be great for a lot of things, but at the end of the day, I don't really think it's as valuable as the equity of the AI company that thinks everything all the time 1 billion times faster and 1 billion times better than us. I don't think it's as better as Tesla if Tesla creates 8 billion robots that then make more robots, right? I think there are a lot of other ideas, right? Making currency move at the speed of light's a good idea. Mm-hmm. But, having robots do everything for us, and everybody having a genius Jarvis that does everything 1 billion times faster and better than they would do it. I think those are good ideas. But obviously, I think the best idea is Bitcoin. The best idea is long-term capital preservation for this civilization, money that lasts forever, right? Immortal, indestructible economic energy is the best idea. Elon thinks Tesla will be worth $30 trillion. I don't know that he's wrong. I mean, I wouldn't bet against him. Everybody's bet against him is lost, right? Right? Elon's winning. They're all losing, right? And so
and he has some Bitcoin.
And he's going to win with Bitcoin, and that's going to make him a fortune too.
Well, Michael, you are known for saying there is no second best, but I just saw a presentation that you gave where in the title you had crypto renaissance. I'm getting the sense that your views on the broader crypto industry are changing, and you mentioned there will be other digital currencies, the tokenization of assets. Can you clarify your views and your forecast on this whole space?
I would say Bitcoin is going to blast up, not grind up, but blast up. It's going to power up much faster because now you have a pro-Bitcoin president, a pro-Bitcoin Congress, pro-Bitcoin legislation. We'll have pro-Bitcoin banks. We're going to have pro-Bitcoin institutions. We're going to have pro-Bitcoin mining, etc. So I think that Bitcoin goes from that powering up at 20% to blasting up much faster than that. And I think that the digital assets industry goes from decaying 20% now to blasting up and growing because the digital assets industry, it can't really prosper in the absence of a digital assets framework, which meets 3 criteria. It needs to be ethically sound. It needs to be economically sound, right? And engineeringly sound, technically sound. It needs to be sound technically, physically sound. So a technical, ethical, economic framework in order to build an entire digital assets industry. So there's no enthusiasm for putting that forward in the previous administration. Now there is enthusiasm, and we'll get one. We've got a promise that we will get a digital assets framework. And I think within that framework, there's clearly a lot of value to be created. If you create digital securities, then what that would mean is you could tokenize a share of Apple stock and you could trade it on a digital exchange on Saturday. And you could even tokenize the Apple stock and you could take self-custody of your Apple shares on your iPhone. And if you can have your photos on an iPhone and your books on your iPhone, and if you can have your files on an iPhone, and if you can have your Bitcoin on an iPhone, why can't you have your Apple stock on an iPhone? So I think digital securities are very powerful, and you could see first billions, then trillions, tens of trillions of dollars of analog securities become tokenized and become digital. And I don't have an ethical problem with it. For example, I wouldn't recommend that you invest in Apple or Amazon or Facebook or Google over Bitcoin. The truth is, I would recommend Bitcoin over my own stock. I would recommend it over anybody else's stock. It's Bitcoin, right? I mean, so I wouldn't really recommend any of 50,000 public companies. But I would say the world's a better place if they all tokenize, if they're all digital, right? I mean, it's pretty clear if on Sunday afternoon you have the option to buy, sell, trade, or transfer your stock, you're empowered. And that's good for the world, and that's good for the people. I think if you move to, say, digital currencies, I consider a Tether or Circle a stable coin, a digital currency. I think that a clear regulatory framework where a corporation can issue them, back them by US dollars or US dollar equivalents like short-term treasury bills. I think if you can do that, that's a good thing for the world. If Tether's going to do it, we should have Tether relocate to the United States, give them a license in the US and let them do it. And I also think, though, you ought to let JP Morgan do it and Goldman Sachs do it. And I think you ought to let Circle do it. I think there should be a competition in the market. And if it turns out that Tether and Circle are better than JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, then I think Tether and Circle should issue all the digital currency in the world. If you're in the United States, you just want, you don't want $150 billion of currency. You want $15 trillion worth of US digital currency to be circulating. So how does Bitcoin, sit next to them? It's not competing with the dollar. What's going to happen is, if the U.S. licenses digital currency and we go from 150 billion in stablecoin to 1.5 trillion to 15 trillion, it just means there's going to be a demand for $15 trillion of U.S. sovereign debt that's going to be bought by the digital currency companies, which is why, of course, you would just put them in the U.S., have them audited by, if we dropped the war on crypto, auditors would audit the stablecoin companies. They could do business with the banks. They could relocate to the U.S. They would buy up $10 trillion worth of U.S. sovereign debt, and they would compete with U.S. banks, and may the better company win, and the winners would be the American people, the world, right? Market economics, and the future.